Hey, everybody. We're so pleased to have you with us here today. I'm Karen Lightman, Executive Director of Metro 21 Smart Cities Institute at Carnegie Mellon. And this is a topic that is near and dear to my heart, this issue of accessibility, equity with respect to broadband. This is a drum that I've been personally beating way before the pandemic, but as I think a lot of us saw that during the pandemic, the lack of broadband access is inequitable and it affects everyone. And so I'm really thrilled that we've had this amazing event today organized by the University of Pittsburgh. Kudos to all involved. And I'm really honored that we get to share some of our expertise, and we'll make sure we put in the chat some resources. We'll also have that networking session later. And in particular, I want to highlight a project that I've been involved in that a few of our other speakers have highlighted. It's something being funded by the Hillman Family Foundations, led by the Southwestern Pennsylvania Commission. And it's this idea of a connected, equitable broadband for all of Southwestern Pennsylvania. It's been a really thorough and in-depth project, and report is coming out on Monday. So you'll all be able to read the report, because what it has in it is some basic information about how Pennsylvania and Southwestern Pennsylvania can position itself for equitable deployment. Because what we found in our research, and you're hearing this around, it's not just rural areas, but it's urban areas that are underserved and unserved. They are paying more money for crappier broadband. Okay, so let that sink in. So even if they have broadband, it's crappier and they're paying more for it. And so we have an opportunity. You're seeing some acknowledgments around the room where we're going to have that conversation. We also have been talking about this idea that broadband should be something you turn on a light, and you should be able, if you can afford it and it's at a moderate price, you should be able to rely on that. You should be able to improve your economic mobility. So broadband is a new form of mobility, and we have this once in a lifetime opportunity because of the investment in jobs, Investment Infrastructure and Jobs Act, to take some put chunk of that $65 billion and bring it here back to Pennsylvania. So our panelists are on a wide spectrum. So we've got experts from academia, from industry, and a little smattering of both. That's what I'm calling you, Nathan. And so we're really thrilled to have this conversation today. I encourage you to please post some questions. I love a discussion. I like controversy. Throw us some challenging ones. We have till noon, so this is our time together. So let's use it wisely. Andy, I'm going to take it. I'm going to throw the ball over to you, and you can introduce yourself, and then we'll go around the room, and then we'll have a discussion. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Karen. I'm Andy Stutzman. I'm here kind of as two roles. My primary job is the Director for Civic Technology at Drexel University's Excite Center in Philly, where I support our digital navigator programs, helping community members get access to the internet, to devices and digital skills. And we also do a lot of outreach around our programming around there as well. And my second role is as the chair of the Technology Learning Collaborative in Philadelphia. We've been around for 9 years, serving as a coalition that does professional development for those professionals and organizations working in the digital inclusion fields. And we just recently got our nonprofit status, and we're a fairly mature organization working with other coalitions. We kind of help other coalitions around the area, giving them feedback and support them as well. So yeah, I'm here with both those roles, and I'm excited to be here. Thanks.
Great. Awesome. Thank you. Lance, a lot of people have been talking about Beaver County, and I think it has no part to it is in part to the work that you've been doing with your colleagues there. Can you introduce yourself and tell us why people are talking about Beaver County with respect to broadband?
Sure. Thanks, Karen. Lance Grable from the Office of Planning and Redevelopment for Beaver County. And as you can see, that made me smile when he said people are talking about Beaver County. It is the greatest county in the entire world. We're doing some unbelievably good stuff with broadband with Michael Baker, who I can't speak highly enough of. We've been on a project here for many years. We started actually prior to the pandemic, and we are moving along. SPC took a lot of what we did and are utilizing it as kind of a role model for kind of what they're doing and how they're getting started and how they're moving forward. And they're doing unbelievable stuff. So don't miss the SPC report that's coming out. It's going to be phenomenal. It's a great collaboration of people and work together. Not to minimize the Beaver County, of course. We're just doing wonderful stuff.
We understand.
We're doing wonderful, wonderful stuff, and it just, once again, it's a collaboration of a lot of people doing, having the same thought of, this is something that we need to do, we need to get done, and we need to get it done now. And I'm blessed to be a part of what we've got going on.
Awesome, Lance. Sam, I'd love to make this transition to the work that you're doing with MetaMesh, and it's such a unique. I would love for you to give us an introduction of yourself and just tell us what MetaMesh is and what you've accomplished in 5 minutes or less. Thank you.
I'll try, Karen. Thank you so much. And I also want to thank Pitt IT and Mark Henderson for hosting this really critical conversation and for inviting a diverse set of stakeholders to this table. It's not always that we're able to break into these spaces. And so these conversations around digital equity in particular, it couldn't be more timely. And we know that this is an all hands on deck situation. And so that's kind of what the MetaMesh solution is about. We are a 501c3 nonprofit wireless internet service provider. So WISP is the acronym there. And we basically grew out of need created by the pandemic. We had existed previously working on mesh networking, which is really, a hyper local way of connecting folks, but it didn't have a major impact. And then the pandemic hit. And we were basically called upon to grow up very quickly and basically deploy a full WISP solution. And we were able to do that because of our strategic partnerships with groups like the University of Pittsburgh, Carnegie Mellon University, Penn State University, and many, many others. And so we've been able to deploy our wireless infrastructure on some really notable structures. You'll have heard about the Carnegie, the Cathedral of Learning in Oakland. That is our main distribution point. So we've turned that historical structure into effectively a cell tower, as Mark explained. So that's really the strategy around the MetaMesh WISP solution, is to leverage existing community resources like existing structures or people and people power that already exist within communities to solve the problem by a community basis. So that means making sure that we're tailoring a solution. It includes a layered technology approach, because we know that the same technology is suitable for certain use cases and not for others. So the other big thing about MetaMesh is our business model and the way we price these services. We know that internet services are costly to deploy. So this service is not free end all, but we are able to keep it no cost to the end user. So we're creating some financial relief for those who live in underserved or unserved communities and have self-disclosed that they could not otherwise afford the internet. And we're able to cover those costs through a sponsored approach. So we work with community stakeholders. These are local folks who have a vested interest in getting their constituents online. They have to deliver their own online services, and they want to see their community thrive economically. And the only way to do that is to deploy internet solutions. And they can pay an arm and a leg, or we can work together and cover that cost on the end user's behalf. So we're really trying to demo a no-cost internet intervention, and also to show that mission-driven work is critical in this space. I'm a representative of a digital equity community that has been thriving for decades, and we're gathering together so we don't duplicate efforts, and we learn, what we've already learned, we build off of that and don't bulldoze over it. So I'm also a representative of the Greater Pittsburgh Digital Inclusion Alliance. That's our local coalition. And it's over 20 member organizations, all engaged in digital equity in some way. So we're really proud of the ability to organize and start creating change. So we're really excited to be part of this conversation. Thank you, Karen.
That's great, Sam. And you just hit it. Like, we don't want to reinvent. Like, my favorite expression is beg, borrow, barter, steal. Like, we are going to utilize what's out there. We're going to make it better. And we have it. And, it's maybe not always in Beaver County, but it might be there sometimes too. But it's also at MetaMesh, right? And it's definitely at Kinber. So Nathan, can you please introduce yourself and tell us about Kinber?
Sure. I'm happy to be here and a little humbled to be following Sam. I can tell you the amount of great work that her and her organization has done over the last couple of years. We've been a partner with them through that process. But, she's really doing a lot of heavy lifting, and that organization has really kind of come through and really taken on a real big challenge that's faced a lot of communities across the Commonwealth. And, I commend her and her organization and what they've been able to accomplish. It's also great to be a part of a group with Andy and what they're doing out there in Drexel. And of course, the best county in the entire Commonwealth, I guess, or the world, I hear it is, in Beaver County. So, So I'm Nathan Flood. I'm president and CEO at Kimber. Kimber stands for the Keystone Initiative for Network-Based Education and Research. As you can see, that's why we shortened it to Kimber. It's a mouthful. The organization was founded about a little over 12 years ago, and we really have kind of been involved with trying to bring access across the Commonwealth since our early inception. The original organization put forth a grant to the federal government back in the Obama administration and got awarded a BTOP grant to build, at the time, a 1,600-mile fiber optic network across the Commonwealth. And one of the big accomplishments outside of connecting a lot of the universities to provide a research and education network was that we really brought fiber into communities that probably had limited fiber access or no fiber access, and really made a real big impact, especially in the northern tier, in some of those communities that we serve. Fast forward to where we are today, I'm sure many people may have heard we have actually closed a transaction with First Light Fiber to actually sell all of our assets. And the reasoning why we did that is because we saw an opportunity, and I think of what we see coming forward is that technology is changing, and what we wanted to do is to be able to continue to lead and engage in that unserved and underserved communities in a different way than what we've done. And I think it shows how we were able to partner and collaborate with a commercial entity to allow them to succeed in areas where they've got expertise, and let us pivot into actually still engage in communities across the entire state, again, to address these issues and change with what's changing nationally and not just here in Pennsylvania. We continue to still provide a research and education network even through our relationship with First Light. So we're still connecting higher ed and providing them RD connectivity, and we're still collaborating within communities. We do a lot of work right now with libraries through the Office of Commonwealth Libraries and the Department of Education. And we see libraries as a real key community anchor point in a lot of communities, and having a lot of people that have no access, and we've heard a lot of that today in the conversations, no access at their home. Sometimes they end up finding themselves at the libraries or other community points to be able to gain access and look for jobs, just access the internet, et cetera. So, and then, we've had a long history of collaboration. You'll hear me emphasize this a lot. I think that it's really great to hear that talk from the Broadband Authority about really emphasizing collaboration and partnership. Kimber, although we had a fiber network at one point in time, we collaborated with everybody, whether it was a large for-profit entity like First Light or Comcast or many of the others that you'll hear out there, to small WISPs like MetaMesh, and nonprofits, communities, and local governments across the state. We really found ourselves to be an enabler to provide access. And if we weren't doing it, we were happy to work with somebody else that could. And so as an organization, we're excited about where the future is going. We're excited about the opportunities that are in front of the Commonwealth, and we're excited about participating.
This is a great segue to the first question. And we want to talk about current status of internet service providers in addressing access, and in rural in particular, but also in some urban areas. So it's access, affordability, things that go hand in hand. But in terms of the service providers, what are your thoughts on, like, Kimber clearly met a need and is serving a need and expanding because of that need. MetaMesh, same idea. MetaMesh, you're more focused on urban rather, as opposed to rural, right? Just because of the way the MetaMesh network works. Is that correct, Sam? Or can you do rural?
We can do rural. And in fact, WISP technology does perform quite well to transmit across far distances. So there's always, as I said, there's use cases for every technology, and there's constraints to all these different wireless technologies. It's finding a way to compile them and leverage all of them so that it builds the right solution based on, like, the topography and the density of the area you're trying to serve.
And this place is sure hilly. We got lots of valleys and mountains. So what are your thoughts? I mean, I don't know, maybe Andy, this is something from your purview. What are your thoughts on what the current status of internet service providers in the state of Pennsylvania in terms of providing that access?
Yeah, I can really only speak towards Philadelphia. That's my experience there. And Comcast is in our backyard. We work with them closely. They are the really one low-cost internet program we have. In that they are there. Verizon is there with the low-cost internet program, which is helpful with affordable connectivity program, which makes it free. Their program is free because they're $20 a month and up to 200 megabytes up and down for speed. Okay. So that's a great program too. But FiOS is really hard to find in the city, depending on the building and how they contracted when they build that building. Did they bring fiber optic to there? So sometimes there's difficulty in getting FiOS as well. So it ends up being that,
Yeah. So
yeah,
Lance,
it's an urban problem. Yeah.
Beaver is not known for being an urban mecca, right? So it's much more rural. So what are your thoughts on the current status of internet service providers in rural counties such as Beaver?
Actually, I mean, as we've gone through this process, we've realized that I think we have 12 or 13 different ISPs in the county. Okay. We have our river towns are more what you would call urban, and then we do have a lot of rural. And I'll be honest with you, I think the options that we have with the ISPs are out there is phenomenal. They have the technology. You have groups like Kimber and MetaMesh that the service that they provide and how they help out is absolutely needed and wonderful. I can't say I have had a better experience with a group of like individuals in a setting like I have with this. These ISPs have been willing to help and share information and work with us. But I think a lot of that has to do with how you set it up originally. We've gone through, and once again, thanks to Michael Baker for this, but we've set it up in a way that they understand that we're not going out we're not going to overbuild. We're not going to do some of those things. And we really have the program set up the right way. And man, I tell you, we've just had unbelievably good responses. The technology that's out there that they have, their knowledge of how to install it and what they need to do is, I think Pennsylvania is really set up. We have a lot of really good ISPs.
Okay, that is great to hear. Nathan, I'm curious what your thoughts are on this, given you've seen the state, you've worked statewide.
Yeah, and I think that, in counties like Beaver or in areas like Philadelphia, you've got a lot of opportunity, a lot of choices to choose from, and there's a lot of great ISPs out there. I'd say that there are a lot of great ISPs across the Commonwealth. I think the challenge is that in some areas, there's just a limited amount of choice. Where you get to some of the rural areas, you might have one or two. I think what we're starting to see, and I think a lot of the providers out there are starting, you'll see things like T-Mobile, for example, is offering their wireless internet component that a lot of people are taking advantage of in some rural areas. You're seeing a mix of technologies. So whether it's, the new satellite or SpaceLink, I think it's called, being utilized in some of the rural areas, wireless technology, the WISPs such as MetaMesh, but there's a lot of wireless small providers out there in a lot of communities. And I think you got to have a mix of it all, the topography across the Commonwealth, the cost to actually try to build out to some of these areas. It's a challenge. And, I think a lot of the providers are aware of that challenge. They're trying to address it. I think this funding that's coming is going to be a great help to a lot of those communities to help address that. And they're being creative. And I think they're trying to come up with ways to solve it. And I think one of the best ways to do it is through collaboration. I think what makes sense for one provider may not make sense for two or three others. And if there's ways for all of them to collaborate on a project so that there's some level of success, I think that benefits not just those providers, but also the communities that they're trying to serve. A term that I heard.
Yeah. No, you're spot on. It's not one size fits all. And I think having these options, having a diversity of options and seeing that we can grow the pie can grow, right. There's more opportunity and not everybody needs the same level of speed and the same level of service. And if I'm running, a manufacturing site, I'm going to need things got to be working. But right. If I'm just trying to do telemedicine, I want it to work, but I'm not running, mainframe computers. So I think it's that diversity of understanding what the needs are and then what is capable and then what the technology solution is. And this is actually related. I think we've started to kind of tease on this question, but there's one question from the audience about what they're calling like last mile or final mile, where there's not going to be, especially in rural areas, you're not going to be able to provide fiber to every doorstop. Like Philly, sure, you can do it, but in Pittsburgh. But what about in those rural areas? What are your thoughts on that last mile stuff?
I'd like to jump in real quick, Karen. So we've already talked about, there's different ways to reach the home, and there's a lot of people have opinions like, what is the best way to do that? Is it fiber to every home in America? That would be excellent, but it would take many years, many dollars to get there, and people need access now. So it's not just extending a technical solution to connect to places that don't have connectivity. That's the easy part. That's the technical side. What's harder is what we call like the last mile of the last mile, which is actually connecting, like not digitally connecting, but connecting with the people that are unconnected. It's incredibly difficult, and it's almost a form of social work within itself. So ISPs need to be prepared to do that.
You need to have trust. You need to build that trust, and then there's that workforce component. Can you talk about some of that, because that is so critical?
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's incredible too. You can make an incredible living as an installer, and you don't need a ton of education to reach that point. You just need someone to train you to how to do it. And that's something that we can easily do. It's something that you can teach yourself. It's open source. There's a lot of, it's pro-employee in that sense. There's a lot of opportunity in this space, and we're ready to train you. So there's going to be more and more opportunity.
All right,
Yeah,
good. I
we're
love this.
seeing that in Philadelphia.
Yeah, Andy,
Yeah,
go for it.
Yeah, we're seeing that in Philadelphia as well with our Philadelphia Community Wireless program that's happening up in North Philly with Temple University and Alex Werner Colin up there. So yeah, we're seeing some of that success. We're hoping to see that grow from there too. Yeah.
Great. So we talked a little bit actually before we were in the green room, and we were talking about this issue of adequate up and download speeds. And just for giggles, I did a little speed test before we came on. And I actually had to go on a different Wi-Fi network because the one I was on was like, eh. So, but I have that luxury, and I have that ability of, choosing. I have access. Can we talk a little bit about upload and download speeds and why it's actually important? And I can't remember who wanted it. Andy, is this the one you were really hot to trot on? You want to talk about?
Well, I was thinking, we have a variety of them. Like Comcast is, their Internet Essentials is 25 down and 33 up, I believe it is. And right now we're looking for 100 up, 100 down right now, trying to get that consistency. That's like the standard we should be shooting for. And Comcast has come up with that. They have the Internet Essentials Plus, which they're doing 100 down, I believe, right now with that. Yeah, so I think we need to see that consistency across ISPs as well to come up to that level right now. And I'm hoping that we see that through within the next year, see some of those changes as well.
Yeah, and I think Lance, was it you who was talking about in terms of the funding and sort of, you talk a bit about that, please.
Well, currently we're using the American Rescue Plan funding, and there is a requirement in that funding of upload download speeds, and so it's important that that we're able to be with ISPs that can provide that level of upload download speed, which once again the ISPs we've dealt with have had no problem up to this point being able to supply that. It also needs to be mentioned the hard work that our legislators are doing in passing House Bill 2071 to go and affect change throughout our entire state. So, locally here we have the House Consumer Affairs Committee have Representative Marshall and Representative Matsey. They've worked so hard, and we work with Representative Kale. And I know Representative Snyder, Pam Snyder, has been on, and she's unbelievable as well. So the work that they have done to change stuff at a state level that is going to change it for everybody in the state is it's so commendable, and it's so needed. So it's super important, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate what they've done, the work they've done.
Yeah, no, I think this is an issue that unites all of us, and there's very few issues that do, right? So let's hold on to this one with both hands. Nathan, I'd love for you to talk about this issue of kind of like measuring underserved and unserved, and how, what are your thoughts on how the upload and download speeds will be there?
Well, I think, what's interesting, and I think this is going to kind of tie to the mapping question as well, is, speeds are one aspect of this. And I think that's, what can be delivered. And I think we need to emphasize that what can be delivered at a particular site, not what you're getting. And, for example, you could have a 25.3 or 10.1 as far as speeds in a rural area, but that doesn't mean that that's the only speed that you get. There could be fiber that runs right down the street and could give you 100 if you wanted it. And so that kind of ties to the accessibility of it, the affordability of it, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're unserved or underserved because you actually have it there. And that's going to be a challenge with the mapping. I think it's going to be a challenge that the authority is going to have with regards to defining how they kind of think about unserved and underserved in some of these communities. Is it a speed test, which I would caution against, or is it actually access to it or no access at all in the area? And I think the other thing, when you think about some of these other technologies, like what Sam's doing, there's limits on speeds that some of the wireless components can do. And we still want to be able to have that to deliver to some of these rural areas and across the Commonwealth.
Yeah.
And I think it's this whole idea, the mapping is so important. It wouldn't be great if all the ISPs would actually just open up and say, this is where we've laid fiber, this is where it's dark, this is where it's lit, this is how fast, this is how much it costs. Would that ever happen?
I don't know. I don't know if that would happen, Karen, but I did want to respond as well to speeds because it's such an important determinant of what we're able to do. The speeds that, we're planning to future-proof our systems, right? Like we're iterating. We're not going to just do 5 gigahertz. We're not going to just do CBRS. We want to make sure that this is scaling in accordance with, the light speed at which technology is advancing. But at the same time, we have tools that can provide high speed, still considered high speed, not quite 100 symmetrical, but it is enough to achieve connectivity and do things like video calls and do the things that you need to do. So we can't undervalue what that can offer as like an intermediary solution until we have fiber to every home or until we have the capability or the funding in place to upgrade that equipment and get into that higher tier of performance that would allow for those speeds. At present, the equipment that's available that's affordable does not. So there's a balance there, and I think there's a place for moderate speeds in this equation, but we all agree we want to make sure that everybody has good quality, reliable service.
And Sam, I think that's a great point. One of the things we did when we started off is an educational portion so that I understood, the people that we went out and talked to understood what the different speed levels were and kind of what could you do with that level of speed. And that was eye-opening to a lot of the folks that we talked about. So they may have been offered a certain speed, and I think Nathan was touching on this, but maybe they weren't subscribing to that speed. So that was one thing. And then the second thing is understanding what they actually really need for, like my parents, they need to get like an email and they need to call me every time that they get one. So I tell them how to open it, but nonetheless, they just need to be able to get an email and maybe send one back. They don't need as high of speed, but they don't even know what that speed is. So we created a dashboard that for me, like dumbed it down for me so that I can understand what speeds means I can do what with my computer. So that was really helpful for us.
Yeah, so actually, I'm just going to jump in. One of the projects that we did with this SPC-led broadband initiative and project is I worked with a third-year communications class in the School of Design at Carnegie Mellon, and alongside with folks at Allies for Children and Michael Baker, we worked with the students to help them understand if we were creating public service announcements about broadband. To communicate, it's like you don't know what you don't know. You don't know what's possible, the realm of the possible, because you don't have that. Like we get frustrated if we see the circle of death for a few seconds. What if that's everything? What if it's the point that you can't apply for a job online? Because every time you try to apply for a job, it craps out and nothing's saved. And so you have to do it all over again. What if you can't get access to benefits? What if you can't go to college? Like all of these things. And so 20 students did these amazing videos and a whole public service campaign. So we're hoping in the next iteration, as we take this statewide, is so that people get excited about it. Because my thought is, we understand what's the realm of the possible with internet, but what if you're in a community and you don't know what you're not missing? The economic development, the community economic development opportunities are so great. So I'm going to try and transition that to talk about mapping and sort of my whole idea of trust but verify. So we hear there's going to be federal mapping coming out. I've said some controversial things that I don't think Pennsylvania should do its own mapping independent of that. I don't think that's a good use of resources. But what we need to do, and I think, I can't who said this, is like we got to figure out how do we verify what is coming down. So when we have that opportunity to give feedback on the maps, how are we doing it? How are we doing it as a united front so that Pennsylvania gets the most money possible? Someone give me the silver bullet answer.
Well, I can just jump in real quick. I mean, what we did is, I'm sorry, I just got an error message. What we did is we put boots on the ground. So FCC has some data out there, and we took that as a starting point. I know Penn State has a map as well, and we utilized that as a starting point. And then we decided to go out and verify all of that data. Michael Baker had an algorithm that we used, so inherently, as soon as we threw that into that algorithm, we were able to break it down even into a finer detail, and then put boots on the ground, visited over 2,200 homes and in sections, not just homes, but areas, and verified all of that data. And we continue to refine that even to this day with some of the other processes we're going through. I don't know that there's I truly believe, of course we did it, but I believe that's the best way to go, is go out, put boots on the ground, and verify the data and see where it's at. Because the last thing I wanted to do also is spend taxpayer dollars or any type of dollars on funding and overbuilding something or putting it where it's not necessarily needed. So in order for me to assure that my commissioners aren't approving that, we put boots on the ground to go out and make sure we took a look at everything. And so
you're well prepared. The bottom line is you're well prepared. And I actually feel like the 10 county project that we did with Michael Baker as well, using that same system, that Southwestern Pennsylvania is very well prepared to trust and verify. What about the rest of the state? Nathan, what are your thoughts on how best to trust and verify the maps?
It's a challenge. I don't know that there's a silver bullet answer like you asked for. It's definitely a challenge because I think you got to factor in a number of things, which is, the maps, I think the original maps talked about, census blocks that the FCC put out, which definitely didn't capture the needs in a lot of areas. I know Penn State's done some great work with regards to the mapping that they've done as well, but I think that there's probably areas that's missed as well. And then we talk about speed. Some of these, I know that, I think Penn State's done some great work on some speed tests. The question is a speed test indicative of what's available?
Right.
So, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't get higher speeds. It just means is what's available. Now you got an affordability problem more than probably a speed problem. So,
right,
those
right now it's been governed by the market, right?
Right.
So,
right. So I wish I had a great answer for the mapping question.
And
Karen, there's some issues. I was going to say there are some issues as well with the tracking as well. Like if someone in one census block has high-speed internet access, everyone in that census block is considered to have high-speed internet access. We know that's not true. So some of the reporting is an issue there too.
Well, the other really important part about mapping right now is the FCC is looking at allowing counties to send in information to them. So they're going through this process, and they're going to be there they're going to be there soon to allow counties to send in what they have. So now is the time to strike with boots on the ground, going out, taking pictures, verifying data, and making sure we know what's there, so that when we can go through that process with the FCC, by the time they're ready to roll, we have the real data that we can send them. And then Pennsylvania itself will have I mean, we will be above and beyond everybody else if we can go out and do that. So mapping is super important right now.
Absolutely.
I'm going to offer a hot take on this topic. Obviously, mapping and data is really important to reporting, to grant funding, all of the mechanisms that get resources to where they need to be. That being said, those statistics, if I know of a community member who lives in a historically underserved community from all aspects in need of my service, I'm not going to wait for a map to tell me that I'm allowed to go there. And so I would just say that while it's a critical step, we need to be doing this. Digital equity workers have this native knowledge of where people need services. So tap into that, because we can actually take action while we're solidifying the bigger picture. So that's my 2 cents.
No, Jim, you're
and I think
spot
that goes
on.
back to, I was going to say, that goes back towards these coalitions and being able to kind of put up front to the Broadband Authority and the folks in legislation saying, hey, we know we have experience in this. We know where the needs are. Work with us and we can help you with that. That's what these coalitions really can help with.
Well, and great point, Sam, because as we started our process, I'm sorry, Karen, we had so many people reach out to us and say, hey, my area, I heard you guys are doing something. My area is not covered, that sort of thing. So we had so much of that. And all we did is go and verify that with the field work that we were doing. And it meshed up perfectly.
It's great, and saved so much time and resources by doing that.
Right. And so with the new census data, I mean, I think there's a lot of information about understanding the equity. So like the work that we did on that connectivity, broadband connectivity project that'll come out on Monday, you'll see that we looked at like what are communities where they don't own a car, they don't own a house, they are on, they're on support. Elderly, like having all this demographic information so you can have an understanding of like, if you're going to go to underserved and unserved, you also need to go where like raise the tide for all boats. But if they're way down here and you're bringing it up, these people down here are still below. Mm-hmm. And so you need to think about being more about equity. It's not just the access and affordability. So we are like, oh my gosh, we only have a few minutes left, but I'd love to kind of throw this question. If you had advice that you wanted to give the PA Broadband Authority, and they have this new executive director that I can't wait to meet, what advice would you give them? Let's do a little quick round robin around the room, and then we'll kind of summarize things. Nathan, I'm going to you because it looks like you're thinking hard. What's your advice?
I think I would strongly encourage as they try to figure out how to fund and fund these communities is really emphasize collaboration and cooperation amongst the different stakeholders. I know that they're going to hear a lot about, and I've heard it here a little bit today, is overbuild, and nobody wants to spend money in an area that's overbuilt or doing overbuild. But at the same time, I think there's opportunities where maybe existing providers either it isn't a way that they want to service a customer, wireless solution, for example, but if they collaborate maybe with a MetaMesh or somebody else in that area, that they collectively can actually service a lot of those constituents. So I'd highly emphasize collaboration.
Right. And I feel like we have the assets here, like there's a lot of great people that have come to this conference today as well. Andy, thoughts on what advice you give?
Yeah, I think collaboration, especially between the coalitions, and how can these coalitions help the rural counties? I think that's a big piece of that. But one piece is the other last mile we haven't really talked about, and it's what we do with the Digital Navigator work here in Philly. But also, I know Computer Reach in Pittsburgh is doing this. We're actually getting people connected, but also creating awareness. You can provide all this technology, you can provide the connectivity, but if people aren't aware that it's out there, if they don't trust it, and if they and if they aren't aware of why they need it, right? Because there's that analog inertia is a term that's been coming around. Like, why do I need these services? All those things, need to happen to get people connected as well. Because we have a lot of people in Philly, that have not heard about our free services for internet connectivity, and we've been doing this for 2 years. And just that awareness piece is really, really critical, and that is really part of that last mile as well. So
that is absolutely true, and that's why we the communications component is going to be really critical, and then it goes hand in hand too with the opportunity of workforce development. Sam, thoughts on what advice you'd like to give?
Yeah, absolutely. And Andy, thanks so much for bringing up Computer Reach. We work so hard to to partner it's an integral part of our solution, is to make sure that we focus on what our slice of the pie is, which is broadband. But we need to make sure that those wraparound services exist so that people have the device and the skills to use those things. I had the privilege of going to Harrisburg last November to speak to the Senate and the House about rural broadband challenges. And what I told them was something very similar to what Nathan said. We are here. We digital equity workers have been pounding this pavement. We're ready to work and we're organized. Use us, talk to us. We will tell you what you need to know from our perspective. And don't forget that we're the conduit to community voice. We're the ones that are representing those who aren't often represented in these conversations. And so that's data, that's qualitative data that you can't overlook. And so I would encourage the Broadband Committee and the authority to look at non-traditional service providers, look at the folks who are doing digital equity work, and empower them to do things. We know that we're not going to get the big chunks of these funds. We know that. We know that the incumbent providers are in a better position to do things like middle mile and build out and do what they're good at. But we can, be of service, and we want to work together. We want to work with providers. We want to work with government. So don't forget about us is my advice.
It absolutely takes a village, and it looks like something happened in Beaver County. I don't know what happened to Lance. Hopefully he can come join us, but I'm sure he would tell us that we should look to Beaver County. We can say that. And I think, yeah, and with your point about like it's the first mile, but it's also middle mile, and then you need to have that backbone of fiber. And so what's really great is that the Pennsylvania Turnpike Commission has made a commitment to laying fiber across the state. And so we're going to have that connectivity across the state as a great backbone. But then what if you don't live near the Pennsylvania Turnpike? And then how do you get that middle mile? So Nathan, I would assume this is the role of folks like Kimber to help bridge that gap, and then pulling in the great expertise of the groups that are in Philadelphia, that Andy's a part of, as well as Metamesh. And you don't have to just stay in the Pittsburgh region, Sam, right? You could go statewide.
Yeah, that's the plan. It's going to start with the 10-county region. We'll get there.
I think you are deserving of some big funds. And I think what I really want to make sure is that Pennsylvania has the most money. So this is my advice to the Pennsylvania Broadband Commission is like, get the most money possible for our state. Like it is, I've heard something in the news, it's like a minimum of $100 million. That is nothing. Okay. That is nothing. If you divide 65 billion by 50, we should be getting at least $1 billion, right? We should be getting at least $1 billion in the great state of Pennsylvania. And that'll give us an opportunity to then mobilize private sector income, private sector investment, right? So the Comcasts and the DQEs and the Verizons, they see the lowering of the risk. So they're going to be more willing to make investments where they haven't been in the past. Okay. Quick thoughts in our last minute. Anybody burning things you want to share?
I don't want to reemphasize one of the things that everybody's just been saying here at the end, which is, we can build out an entire great network, get everybody broadband, but if a big portion of the population doesn't know how to use it or use the devices that connect to it, it isn't going to make any difference. And so I think, digital equity is also has to be digital literacy as well.
Literacy.
So, yeah. Digital skills training is so necessary to teach people why they need the computer, right? And give them the skills to reach that next step, workforce development.
Right. So
everything.
That workforce component is so key in every aspect. So it could be social workers engaged with communicators as well as the guys and gals who are laying the fiber. So my goodness, we have 10 seconds left. We are amazing. We've solved all the world's problems with regard to broadband. Thank you to my amazing panelists. I'm hoping that Lance is okay out there in Beaver County. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Karen. Good job.